Welcome, everybody. Am I okie dokie, Mr. Smokey? Oh, she's even taller than me, so I'm so glad this isn't the recording. We're good?
I mean, you're not centered.
Ready, Freddy Spaghetti?
Meaning, like, you're not in between the two shelves, but like, okay.
I'll organize myself. Okay.
I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay, so first I want to say a huge mazel tov that we're all here for the life skill series kickoff. This is our first one of the season, Be'ezus Hashem, to be continued. And I want to just give a short introduction about what is the purpose of life skill series and why we do this. So over the years now, Baruch Hashem, we're about to go into 10 years of living Chassidus in the next few months. Woo! And over all the years of helping young, incredible women through the stages of being single and being newly married and then being further into their marriage, we have learned that many times people reach a stage in their lives, whatever stage that is, and they say, oh, I wish somebody would have told me. I wish somebody would have told me about my pelvic floor. I wish somebody would have told me about finances. I wish somebody would have told me about pregnancy and nursing and newborns and all good things that women go through. So at Living Chassidus, we decided to make this a whole series over the fall and winter, and we make it a point to tell you. So tonight is our first one for this year, for this season, and we are so grateful to be here, and we want to make sure that everybody appreciates that this isn't only for married women, and this isn't only for kalas. This is for every single person, both single and married. And after we had a long discussion with our Rav, like the Living Chassidus Rav, about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, he said, this is information that they must have, especially because in our circles, the beginning of pregnancy is generally a pretty secretive time. And so many women don't feel comfortable to just ask around and find out as much information as they can. They usually get the information from one or two people. So here we're giving you all the information that we can, and we're, especially in regards to the topic for tonight, which is our mindset in regards to birth. We spend so many years being bombarded by outside media and outside influences that make us petrified of birth and give us a negative taste and a negative feel of birth. And that can sometimes take some time to process. So for a person who's single, this is a great time to be processing and not come into your marriage with this petrified fear of birth. So that's a bit of why we decided to do the life skill series. Now, I want to share that tonight's sponsor, I'm just opening up to read the names properly. We want to give a very special thank you to our sponsor that's making all of this tonight possible. And she is a huge fan of the Life Skill series. And she sponsored it for Refuah Shlema for Tinuk Ben Tamar Bas Amalia, Yosef Yitzchak Ben Pricha Bared. So Refuah Shlema to everybody, and we should continue to hear amazing news. And also a mazel tov, because that's a new Living Chassidus baby that has joined our family. Okay, while we prepare for our speaker, I wanted to share, and I wanted to inform everyone who doesn't yet know about it, that another incredible program that Living Chassidus runs is called Systematic Avodah Initiative. So the idea of it is that sometimes we think Avodah is this magical thing that happens overnight, like the night before Rosh Hashanah, suddenly we do all of our tshuva for the whole year. And or the amount of people that spend all that time saying like, oh, I wish I would have learned about Yitzis Kislev, but meanwhile now it's Yitzis Kislev. It's a little late now. So we decided to make a program that makes your avoda process systematic. So we have for the incredible new year, or the incredibly filled month of Kislev, which is filled with Chassidish Yamim Tovim, we have a program called the Chassidish New Year. And for every single day of the upcoming month of Kislev, can you text her? Anyway, for the upcoming month of Kislev, we have 1 page of reading with a question that helps it be relatable, that helps it, brings it down to your day-to-day life. And that way you're not only preparing for the upcoming Yom Tovim, that when it comes Rosh Chodesh Kislev, you're like, wow, I know what this is all about. I know the history. I feel excited. And when you show up to a Farbrengen, you're not waiting for the Farbrengener to remind you, what is it, that thing that we're celebrating, and what am I supposed to learn from it? You spent the last several days knowing the history, and not only that, but making it practical. As we at Living Chassidus do, everything we do is meant to be avoda b'poel. It should be lived. It should be in a way that it affects your life. And so therefore, every single day there's a bit of, whether it's a historical account, or whether it's, for example, we have a really beautiful one for, there we go, Rosh Chodesh Kislev and all the history. Yay! So for every single day, we have something to think about and something to process that helps you relate. So that kickoff for that program is Be'ezus Hashem this upcoming Tuesday. You can register for the program. You'll receive the book. You'll also receive a journal for you to journal the answers to all of the questions, or at least 1 journal a week. And obviously the most beloved Living Chassidus pen. I'm not just saying that, it's actually the best. And every other, or almost every week, in honor of every single one of the Yom Tovim of the month of Kislev, there is a Farbrengen. And at that Farbrengen, if you've done your reading and you've done your journaling, we give out incredible prizes. We've given out Svarim, we've given out Bluetooth speakers, we've given out jewelry, we've given out all kinds of amazing things, Tehillims and other Svarim and Pushkas, and beautiful, beautiful prizes all around over here. In this way, you keep your Nefesh Bahamas nice and excited about the topics. So that is coming up. You can register at livingchassidus.org/SAI, and you'll receive all of your materials. And if you're out of town, then there's a Zoom and a recording, and you'll be all of your prizes and materials will be shipped to you. Okay, with that, now we get to the extra fun stuff. Okay, so tonight, our topic for tonight of our life skill series is women's health, birthing a new mindset, creating positive birth experiences with Chaya Musia Baruch. So Chaya Musia is a mom of a bunch of ages, 6 months to 18 years, and she's been a doula for over 13 years. As a doula, her goal is to help women achieve births where they come out having felt safe and supported, knowing that they had choices, were heard and cared for as they transition into motherhood via this important journey called pregnancy and birth. Chaya Musia also helps those who had difficult births process, heal, and move on through storytelling, and is also recently trained in the Body Ready method, helping with common pre- and postnatal pain and discomfort, as well as preparation for a smoother birth through daily habit adjustments and exercises tailored to individual needs and goals. And tonight we have the great zchus of having Chaya Musia here with us. So I will pass the mic on to her. Thank you. If you are cold, I couldn't try and cover that. There's definitely a draft. It's not on, but it's letting in some air. Yes. So let me know and I will check this one for now.
We'll watch this live.
Yes.
I just like to grab you a good sweater and say yes to record. You're the mom. What?
Do I put this on?
Yes.
Sure. Oh, it's something fall off. Oh, this.
Yep.
That's supposed to.
Okay, that should work. I'll check.
So this falling thing, as soon as you even like touch it, it's rolling again.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah.
Someone just said something.
Thank you.
Someone just said something. Now it does think.
Okay.
Works now.
Yeah. Well,
Check again.
okay, we're good.
Just leave it like that.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hello. Birthing a new mindset, right? Creating positive birth experiences. The title written by Michal, and I love it. Thank you for inviting me. I know that's like one of those things that everybody always says when they speak, and I always wonder if they mean it. But this is really a topic that I'm passionate about. This is what I do, creating positive birth experiences. So I'm really excited to share it with you all today, and yeah, to bring with you on the topic. And usually I get to, I know the crowd is a little bit mixed, but usually I get to talk to people who already gave birth. You know, how many of you are, I see some single, some married. I don't know how many of you have kids or none yet, but usually I end up talking to people who already gave birth or getting gave birth a couple of times. Or with my clients when they come to me, which very often they're already pregnant or they're coming to me for, they're looking for a doula. They might, have waited till they're past, like they're already showing. Some come to me, they're in their 8th month. So it's like, okay, now we're going to start talking about, and in their mind, it seems like a good time to start talking about, giving birth. But we're already at that point catching up a little bit on like stuff that we could have, learned a long time ago. So I'm really excited and appreciative, Michal. The whole life skill series, I think it's super cool to kind of like learn about all kinds of things. And birth is such an important thing. That's really part of us as girls, as women. So let's do it. I've been a doula for 13 years. And really my journey into like being a doula and working with pregnant women started when I was pregnant with my first. I was still learning, I was reading. I was a little bit more of the mindset that I just wanted to give birth, on my own. I felt like birth was something that's normal and natural, and I didn't want to be surrounded by, fear and all that, but I didn't really know where to go. So somehow I found my way and read a lot of books, and I found myself still pregnant, but already being that source of information for other people around me who wanted to know more. And so I ended up finding a group of midwives that very much supported women, allowing their bodies to just do what it needs to do in birth. And then they offered me to give birth in their birth center, which is in a hospital. And I was like, oh, what's that? So I learned about that. And I ended up having my, first birth, which is very often, long and intense. But I was, I was doing it. I was very committed to the process. And I remember the moment when they put the baby, baby came out and baby was handed to me and placed on my belly. And I looked at my baby and I was like, knowing that a woman, is supposed to give a carbon chatas because usually she swears that she'll never do it again. And I'm like, this was okay. I would do this again. And in that moment, I was like, so wowed by that, like ability to go through, the whole entire birth, as, intense as it was, and then feeling like I could do this again. And this feeling came to me also, like, I want to help other people being able to give birth and come out of it and feel like I could do this again. So I think that, like, idea of, like, I want to help other people get there started then. And then I started, a few years later, I think I was actually with a French speaking woman who I asked her, like, oh, do you have somebody to go with you? And she's like, yes, but not if it's Shabbos. Yes, but not if it's Pesach. I said, I'll come with you. You can't go alone. You don't speak the language. You can't even communicate with your doctor. So I went with her. I was mesmerized by the ability to witness birth, and started offering friends and family, ended up taking a course. And then somewhere down the line, I guess once you're a doula, you become like this, people just come to you with their stuff and their stories, and people would come to me after the birth. So, my goal is to help the people that I work with have a smooth birth. And then they were coming to me, oh, my friend had a really traumatic birth. What do we do for her? And, people would come to me with that side of the story, the aftermath of when it didn't go, in a way that they ended up feeling positive about their birth. And I ended up taking a training. So I'm now also able to help women who didn't have a positive birth experience kind of work through that. And the bottom line is that birth matters. Period. That's a full sentence. Birth matters. It matters a lot. Ask your mothers, ask your grandmothers. They remember, their births. Women remember not everything, maybe not the color of the wall, but there are aspects about their birth that they remember pretty much forever. Birth impacts us in a very deep way. And what we actually remember is not, besides for the fact that we might not remember the color of the wall or the color of the linen, we might not even remember, or what's impacting us so much is maybe not necessarily if it was a vaginal birth or a C-section, whether I had an epidural or didn't have an epidural. What I'm going to remember is whether I felt safe in that process, whether I was supported during my birth, whether the people around me listened to me and considered my opinion as the most important thing, what I wanted, whether I was able to express what I wanted. So creating positive birth experiences is, and understanding that and shifting our mindset goes back to, what is our mindset? What do we think about birth? What comes up when we think of the idea of giving birth? What does that make us, Mir Hashem, those of you who haven't yet, eventually, come your way. When you think of that idea of going through birth, what comes to mind? Do we go around the table, or is, am I on Zoom? Am I supposed to keep on talking? Yeah. Anybody want to share? Like, when you think about the idea of giving birth yourself, what do you think? What does that make you feel?
Alone.
Fear?
It's exciting
Alone.
and scary.
Exciting and scary. Yeah. Scary?
Yeah.
Huh? A miracle. Yeah. Anybody else?
It makes me a mom.
Makes you a mom. Yeah. Definitely. It's the process. We're going to talk about that more. The process that makes you mom. So scary. It's a miracle. Fear of being alone. And it's the process that makes us a mother. So when we talk about, creating positive birth experiences, why do we need to like create positive birth experiences, right? When there is, fear originating, when there's fear, that comes first, then we want to shift that into a positive, birth experience, or positive thoughts around birth experiences. So why is there fear? Anybody want to share? Why is there fear? Where's the fear coming from?
I never did it. Or for first time moms.
Right?
Medical field and hospitals.
Going into hospital, being in a medical environment, pain, probably won't go according to plan. A lot of unknowns. Yeah, definitely.
Very vulnerable.
Vulnerable. Yeah, very vulnerable. Yeah. So what shapes that fear, right? Where is the fear coming from? Where is it originating? So there's different places that the fear could come from. There is what the media feeds us, whether we watch TV or movies and we see it all go screaming and crazy. Whether we've been around other people who gave birth and didn't have a good experience, and they, try walking around with a pregnant belly, and everybody comes to you sharing their scary birth.
I have no
Right?
idea what you're talking about.
You've never experienced that before, right? And so it's what they share with us, those other people, which A is their experience, and B, sometimes it's even a misunderstanding of their own experience. Just to give a very small example, emergency C-section. It's a very interesting fact just to know. Side note, anything that's not a planned C-section is called an emergency C-section. It doesn't mean, but when, right, words have meaning and they make us feel a certain way. When we hear the word emergency, we are automatically associating it with danger, trauma, sirens, right? So those words have very strong, strong impact on us. So other people, their births, what they shared with us, and how that makes us feel, and maybe their understanding of what happened. Because for all I know, that person is like, the doctor saved my baby from danger. We had an emergency C-section. There may have been different reasons for the emergency C-section, and again, it could have been just because it's not a planned C-section. So it happened during the birth. It's automatically an emergency C-section. What else shapes our fear around birth? Maybe the idea that birth is a punishment, right? Chava was punished. And so one of the punishments to the man is that he shall toil to, work the land, earning bread is going to become something that's difficult. And for the woman, birth is going to become something that's difficult. So that's, again, we are it's ingrained in us that birth is supposed to be a punishment, a painful thing, a difficult thing. And so bottom line is, many people are walking around feeling in general that birth is this scary, painful process, kind of an annoying mountain that we just have to get across to get to the other side and get my prize, which is my baby. And so anything that we can do to avoid, to make that process shorter, quicker, easier, pain-free, whether it's an epidural or choosing for a C-section from the get-go, so I can just, wake up and have my baby, get through it, as easily as possible to get rid of that scary mountain. And then there's the question, can we shift that mindset? Is there another way that we can look at it? And the short answer is yes, there is. Birth can be a beautiful event. It could be a safe journey, even if it's hard. And during that journey, the mother can feel safe. She can feel okay while going through every step of it. She can feel protected and fully aware of her body. I'm not talking about, but there was back in the day something called twilight sleep. They gave the woman a certain gas or whatever, they put them out and they woke up and they had their baby. And the women actually, I think that sometimes part of what we wish is like, can we cut out that mountain, that difficult process? Can we just skip that piece and get to the baby part, right? Or, somehow make it work. But the women actually did not appreciate, besides for the fact that there were, health impacts of twilight sleep. But the women did not appreciate. I even have sometimes women who, either had an epidural or had a C-section and feel like they missed out on something. There's somehow this part, this, birth is something that we are meant to experience in a very present way. And while we're experiencing it, as intense as it can be, still feel that the process itself can also be something that is okay. And if we look at the basic function of birth, right? Birth is part of reproduction. Actually, I made the world in a way that it can just continue and we can multiply ourselves and that can continue from generation to generation forever. And so in order for that to be successful, so to speak, we need to have some very basic things built into that system of reproduction. Number one is that in the majority of cases, when somebody gives birth, it needs to have the outcome of a physically healthy mother and baby. Otherwise, reproduction is not right. Number two, it needs to be untraumatic, because if it is traumatic, then we can't do it again, right? And more than that, it actually needs to be a rewarding process, the process that a woman comes out of it and is encouraged to do it again. What? Rewarding? Like, oh, that was good, I want to do that again. Like, is that something that really exists? I actually just bumped into a friend, and I told her I was going to be speaking tonight, and she said to me, when I had my first and I came out of that, she said, giving birth and going through that process is the one thing that I have done that gave me the most confidence ever in my entire life, and that left me with this feeling that I can do anything. And so if birth is a journey to motherhood, and is that process, is that piece that gets us to the other side of being a mother, then how amazing is it that that exact experience is what can leave us feeling powerful, capable, strong, and kind of feeling I can take the world on, right? We at the end of that, right, we have our baby, but now we're a mother, now we're a parent. Parenting is for all eternity, forever, a responsibility for another human being. And here I am. Now I'm the mother. What do we need? We need someone who's strong. We need someone who feels capable, who feels confident, who feels powerful, who feels like she can do anything. And birth is made in such a way that the mother is built, the mother is created in that moment. And obviously, that is, the most impactful when a mother gives birth for the first time, right? Because before that, she was not a mother. Now she is a mother. But truthfully, every single time a woman gives birth, that transformation is something that she taps into, and she becomes a mother once again. And that process is designed to shape her into that powerful mother that she can then be. Let's go back to Chava, right? As Chassidim, we know that although Galus is a punishment, and I'll revert back to Michal, and the Sfarim have left me many, many years ago, or I left them, I don't know. But from the, what I do know from Chassidus and from what we learned from our Rebbe, from our Rebbe, is that yes, Galus can be looked at as a painful punishment, but we know it's so much more. We know that it's a process and it's a journey, and it can be a happy one. We can, go through our, Galus, so to speak, with Simcha, knowing that that process is what leads to Geula. It's not a punishment that we would rather cut out and get to the finish line. We have to go through this process to get to the finish line. And so if we can change our mindset on Galus, we can change it on birth as well. How that fits in with Chava's punishment to the detail, I can't tell you. But what we do know is that that process is designed to be part of what we do right now. And we could do it in a Geulah way, right? Mashiach is already, we're in the process of Geulah. So, and part of living Geulah is opening our eyes and actively living it. Let's practice. Let's live in a way that birth itself can be a positive and beautiful thing. Let's bring it into the now. So how do we get there? Information is a very big one. Information, knowledge is power. What you read about birth, especially if you're coming from the pretense that birth is or can be something scary or dangerous or something with potential danger luring around the corner, choose what you read. Choose what you watch. pay attention to who you listen to, right? We talked about the scary birth stories that are friends and mothers and unwanted, intruders, those same ones that come to touch the pregnant belly. They might show up with their story. You're like, did you ask my permission before talking to me? They don't really have to, obviously, but you have the choice to say, I'm so sorry I had a difficult experience, but I really want to surround myself around with positive stories about birth, you know, and, can we switch the topic to something else, right? We choose what we put in. So, and especially for when we're going through it for the first time, um, a lot of the fear, I think someone in the back mentioned it, is the fear of the unknown. I've never done it before, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that even if you've never done it before, you can learn, you can read, you can take a childbirth class. When you do those things, obviously look for the birth positive books, look for the birth positive classes. And when you have more information, you understand more about the process, you understand more about the choices that you can make that can help you have a positive birth, then you can change a lot of that fear of the unknown into like, okay, I'm doing the steps and I'm learning and I'm understanding more about it. It takes away a lot of the fear. Choose your team, whether it's, which doctor or midwife am I using? Am I using the doctor? Am I using a midwife? Right. So, in general, the general idea is that doctors are medical providers that had training in medicine, in healing illness. And typically, their training is more focused on like all the things that we need to look out for that could possibly go wrong. And then you have the midwifery care model that looks at birth more as like a natural, normal process. And as long as everything's going right, we're going to assume that it's going to continue going right. If something comes up, then we'll deal with it. So that's the general, different ways of looking at it. But then you have doctors who are more of that belief, and then you have midwives who are more of the other belief. But the bottom line is that you want to choose a doctor from the doctors and a midwife from amongst the midwives, whichever one you're choosing, that is going to support birth positive birth.
Okay, so next Wednesday, B'ezras Hashem, we're having like a Grill the Midwife session, life skill series. And so if you have questions about midwives and their training and all of that, that's
coming next week. Great.
Yes.
Ask for references when you hire your provider. All the time do I hear people say, well, that's who my mother used, my best friend used, my cousin liked the doctor. What was your cousin looking for? What was your friend looking for? Is it maybe, for all you know, it was just because it's local, easy to get to. Maybe that wasn't someone who thought about how she wanted to give birth, or maybe she did, but she wanted something very different than what you might be looking for. So the first is information, shape the ideas of what you're looking for, and then make sure that you have a provider that is in line with what you want, the kind of birth that you're looking for. Hire a doula. Have someone with you. Someone mentioned being alone. You don't have to be alone. Birth never in history was something that women did alone. And it doesn't have to be. You can bring a doula, you could bring your mother. I have had great experiences, even as a doula, having also the mother, come to the birth. It's not for everyone. Don't bring your mother just because she's your mother. That's not a good idea either. Bring your mother if you can fully give birth in the way that you envision yourself being at your birth, with your mother at your side supporting you. If that's not the case, then bring a doula, bring a friend, both. Have a team around you of birth positive people, or people who are going to listen to you and support you and help you along the way.
Can you share just in case, definition of doula and doula versus midwife?
So doula is somebody who's there to help you access information that's going to help you make decisions that are right for you, and support you through the process, support you physically, support you emotionally, during the birth, but also during the pregnancy. You don't have to wait to reach out to a doula the same way that you don't wait to reach out to a midwife or doctor until you're in your fourth month or whatever you wait. There's someone that can actually help you instead of, being in your eighth month, hiring your doula, and then your doula asks you, how do you like your provider? And you're like, well, your provider is going to be very, very important at the birth. The prenatal visit, the doctors and midwives usually um, see their client every month throughout the pregnancy, are often very basic. The question is, what are they going to offer to you in birth? And is that what you want? You don't want to find that out in the eighth month. Call your doula at the beginning of the pregnancy, or find someone that you can talk to that can help you make the decision of finding a good provider. And a doula is there for the actual birth, supporting you physically, emotionally, helping you feel safe and calm, as well as physical comfort, such as touch, massage. Different doulas offer different things, whether it's, bringing in music or smells, helping you with different positions that can help the baby come out easier and help with pain relief. So doula has, a lot of different roles that she can fill during the birth, and then also after the birth, being in touch with you, making sure that you're transitioning into motherhood safely, and helping initially with breastfeeding, giving you recommendations if you need to hire, additional help, whether it's lactation consultant, or I just had somebody, this was also a little bit of hashgacha pratis, but a client of mine who gave birth not so long ago, happens to be my daughter goes to her as mother's helper. I'm supposed to do a postpartum visit with her tomorrow, but even before that, because my daughter was there, my daughter happened to mention to me that she was making supper, and she's a week and a half after having a baby. So I made a few phone calls, to try to arrange those things. So it's also, after the birth, checking in on you, and helping, just being available. My phone is on for my clients as needed. A midwife, on the other hand, she's the medical provider. So her role is similar to the doctor, doing the monthly prenatal visits, checking on you and the baby, the medical aspect, whereas the doula is really focusing on the mental, emotional information, all that, your comfort, basically, in the process. Choose where you're having a birth. Are you having your baby at home? Are you having a baby in a hospital? Are you having your baby in a birth center? Do you want to learn more about that? Where you're going to give birth, your environment is also going to have a big impact on how you feel during your birth, and how you feel about your birth coming up. Some people have had past, negative experiences in a hospital that's going to impact them when they walk through the door, right? And birth is a very delicate process, meaning there are hormones that are, very, very active, making the birth go smoothly, and, keeping the birth going. When we are in a state of fear or, uncertainty, those hormones are not flowing the way that they should be. So it's not only, right? Sometimes we have people who are like, oh, I heard people give birth at home because they just want a candle lit and they want nice music. And how are they sacrificing their, safety and their baby safety just for ambiance, like do that when you're going out on a date, leave birth in the safest place you can, which is at home. So just, for the record, statistically, somebody who doesn't have any high, risk factors can very safely give birth at home, or in a birth center. And people need to give birth where they feel safest. It's not only about how I feel. It's also about how the birth will actually go. Because people who give birth when they feel safe will have smoother births, will have shorter births, and will, have less chance of like bleeding after birth. They end up with actual physical, less chance of postpartum depression if they give birth feeling safe and supported. So where you give birth is important, and the environment around us. What am I going to wear? Those are maybe simple things that we don't necessarily think about. But as soon as somebody puts a hospital gown on me, I feel like a stranger. I feel like I'm in an environment where somebody needs to do something for me or to me. Whereas if I'm wearing my own clothes and I can, keep the lights low, even if I'm in a hospital, I can maybe continue giving birth feeling more like I'm the birth giver. This is my process. This is something where I'm doing this. And it changes the physical outcome for mom and baby. So the choices are important, and it is our responsibility to make those choices and to be responsible for our experiences and our outcome. That's not to say that if something happens that didn't go well, that it's my fault. That's something very different. What it means is that going forward, I can make choices, and those will impact how I will feel about my birth looking back. What about pain? Right? Pain is something that's pretty serious. To be very honest, obviously, as a doula, very often that's something that I am, so to speak, focused on, like helping my clients have experienced less pain. But pain is a very, very interesting topic in and of its own that I'm not an expert on at all. But one thing that I can say is that the intensity of pain is actually important for birth, because if not, then we would just continue doing our Empire Kosher shopping or continuing, doing our job and not, and those are actually real thing. There are people that don't experience pain or that experience very minimal pain. And sometimes that can be difficult because they don't have a chance to plan appropriately for a safe place to be. So just for the very, very, very simplistic and very basic, we need some sort of, alert that's telling us, oh, something important is happening. I think my body is going, I need to stop what I'm doing and focus on my body, focus on my birth, get to the place of where I need to give birth, get things ready, right? So it's a safety thing. And again, like some people, the amount of people that don't feel any pain it's extremely rare. It does exist. You have these people who just got one big contraction and then the baby comes. But other than that, there's a very wide variety of how we experience pain and how intense that feels. And interestingly enough, I started listening to this talk, didn't fully listen to it, but again, like I said, pain is something very interesting. The old, theory about pain was that we have pain receptors in our body. So as soon as, somebody falls on their knees, there is something in their knee that's making them feel pain. But new science teaches us that that is actually completely not true. That there is a sensation that's alerting us to potential danger. And I guess via messages, again, I don't, have the full science down pat, but it's sending messages to our brain that then, tell us, is this something that is danger, and that's how the pain then becomes something that our body creates. So the pain is something that we create. It's not something that is coming from outside of us. The pain is something that is coming, from our body based on whether our brain agrees that this impact is perceived as actual danger or not. So where that leaves us is as follows. When we are going through the process of birth and we feel safe and we feel supported and we know that it's a normal process, that will impact how we experience the sensations of birth. Again, I'll kind of leave it at that because it's a complex topic, but the bottom line is that if we prepare ourselves for the idea that birth can be safe, that it's normal, that it's a healthy process that we were meant to do, and can really internalize those messages, it can tremendously impact how they can manage their birth and how they can cope with the sensations of birth. What if I am scared? So now, okay, so I'm already scared, right? I already have fear because that's just, the environment I grew up with, what I heard from my mother, society. I'm already feeling, nervous, anxious. So first of all, I'm going to say that just because I'm a doula and just because I already gave birth and I, never had an epidural doesn't mean I'm not scared. Doesn't mean that there will never be fears that come up. In fact, if you're a birth professional, likely is that you've seen a thing or two and that you're more likely to have all kinds of thoughts and fears and ideas. And as I got busier as a doula, and like I could say that, when I was expecting my first, and I was, confident, and I was like, oh, birth can be this, and I'm gonna surround myself around birth positive books and classes and hire midwives that believe in that and all of that. Fast forward a few years, and then you go through a thing or two, you see a thing or two, and it's like, oh, now I have to like deal with my own, stuff, the stuff going through my head. So the first step is to, look the fear in the eye, so to speak, like be aware of what you're feeling. So I think it's also good that we kind of went around the table and like, okay, what comes up for you when you think about birth? Think about that, listen to that, hear what's coming up for you. What do you feel? What do you think when you think about the idea of giving birth? And then, okay, so now I know this is how I feel. This is what I think. Now what do I do next? You can work towards, think about your goal. What do I want? Okay, I feel fear, or I'm anxious, or I'm nervous. I'm worried about being alone, but I want to feel positive about birth. I want to feel that it's something that I can do. I want to feel that it's something that I'm going to go through safely. So how do I get there? Okay. We talked about some of those things, right? Surround yourself with positive information, hire a doula, read the right kind of books, listen to birth positive affirmations. There's different childbirth classes that specifically focus on, impacting your mindset. There's hypno babies and there's hypnobirthing. Yes, they use hypnosis, but it's really, it's not, like someone on stage that's being hypnotized and goes out of control. It's actually the opposite. It's, self-hypnosis, where we choose what we think about and how we feel. And when we do that repetitively and we train our brain to go into hypnosis, to feel calm and safe, and to hear certain messages about our bodies, about our birth, then we can internalize them and actually practice that during our birth. So
what you're saying about the receptors. Where you're saying about the new research about the pain receptors.
Right. So if we have, so by preparing in that kind of way, we can impact how our pain experience is going to be.
I call it Mayachal.
100%.
It's the birth version.
Yeah, 100%. So birth is a normal function, something that we were meant to do. Thousands of women did it before us, and we could do it too. I didn't go into so much like epidural, no epidural, that kind of thing. I don't, we could talk about that if people want to go into it more. But like I said, it's not that's going to create my positive or negative birth experiences. Who is there with me? Who is there for me? Did I have a say in the matter? And I have sometimes people are like, oh, if you get an epidural, you don't need a doula. False. I have clients who come to me birth after birth, and their go-to plan is to get an epidural. Why that's there's detailed reasons for why that's helpful, but besides for the fact of like, sometimes the epidural doesn't work until you get the epidural. When do you want to get the epidural, and how that might impact your actual birth? Having somebody at your side who knows the process and who can help you feel safe and confident is important, no matter what kind of birth you choose. I think I was just actually speaking to someone who is planning a C-section. She's like, I made the mistake last time of not taking someone with me. I want to hire a doula to come with me for my C-section. So yeah, we can birth safely. We can birth in a positive way. And, if we prepare for it properly, then we can be 100% okay while going through this transformative journey of becoming a mother. That's my talk for today. Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned hypnobirthing. I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on hypnobirthing, and would you especially compare hypnobirthing versus other methods? are mothers that use supervision really much more calmer and better at coping than other methods?
So it's hard to take like one, method and compare it with different people, because some people um, are naturally more at peace and calm with their birth, and they may not have taken such a class and be at the same place that somebody who took such a class is. You understand what I'm saying? But overall, it is a good way to prepare for a positive, calm birth. And through, again, like I said, repetitive positive messages, they have CDs, there's a book. So when we flood ourselves, like when in my last 2 pregnancies, had different things come up for me, I looked for, things to listen to, things to read. So they have, a program that can help you, prepare for a positive birth. It could definitely make a difference. Can I talk about epidural? Yeah, sure. What do you want to know? Right. So, so the idea is very, the way we know it is simple. I'm going to go through this process. It's likely to be intense and painful. And the epidural is there that can take away the pain. So why not, right? Hashem made the epidural, like this is something I hear very often. Hashem made the epidural to use. Whatever Hashem made is there to help us. We should use it, right? And that would be true probably if there was no risk to taking it, right? There are definitely situations where the epidural is right. There are situations, for example, where somebody's very tense. I've seen it many times. And then they get an epidural and they are much, much calmer, and they're able to then give birth faster. Like I've had people, not make progress. They're, in their birth, but things are just not moving, and stress is a big impact, which again, ideally we want to go back and say, okay, how can we reduce the stress? Do we need to turn off the lights? Do we need to, everybody, all the nurses, doctors, everybody step out of the room and give mom some alone time with her husband so she can, feel safe again. There's, obviously other ways to reduce that, but sometimes there are situations somebody is stressed out and it's actually impacting their ability to progress and get to the point of birth. So sometimes in that kind of situation, for example, epidural can be helpful. Epidural, for one thing that, is a given pretty much with an epidural in this country anyways, is that you have to be laying down, and it's not beneficial for baby to come down when we're laying down. So that's one disadvantage of getting epidural. Actually just yesterday on like a doula chat that I'm in, people were discussing like babies in a posterior position. So babies ideally when they come out, they're facing down, meaning they're looking down at the ground. Actually, when they come out, their face is facing our backs. That's the easiest way for a baby to come out. And sometimes when a baby is born, what they officially is called posterior, but we also call it sunny side up because they come out and they're looking up. That can make birth more challenging. And so yeah, but yes and no.
Good answer.
Well, first of all, face, right? This is mush, this is hard. And also because of the way our body, for us in our body, it's the same thing. This is hard, this is soft, right? And also babies that are born posterior are often also not tucking their head. So a baby is supposed to, when it comes out, tuck. And if you guys can do this with me if you want. If you make a circle, baby's got to come out. If your head is face up, there's a very wide diameter that the baby's head has to fit through, whereas baby is tucked, this part of the head is smaller. So baby needs to tuck his head to come out. And so somebody on the doula chat was just talking about somebody's on an epidural and the baby is posterior and we're not making progress. We're not getting, babies can be born posterior. One of my babies was born posterior is when baby is facing the not ideal way. Babies can come out that way, but it is very often more difficult longer, and sometimes they don't come out. And then
Can they turn around?
then that would be a C-section, right? So yes, baby can be turned around. In most cases, baby needs to turn around. So interestingly enough, our body is giving birth, but baby's also a big part of that process. And for the baby to rotate appropriately, our movements are going to be very important. And so one thing that we're losing out on, so to speak, if we're on an epidural, is that movement, the changes of positions. And interestingly enough, when a woman is in a safe, environment and is not an epidural, she will move in different ways throughout her labor, throughout her birth, without being told to. Obviously, a doula can sometimes be helpful in like, oh, this is a good position for where you're at in your birth now. But if we just do nothing and just watch women give birth when they are in their safe space, they will make those different moves to, allow the baby to move through their body. So that's one thing, once a woman has an epidural. So in this example that they were discussing yesterday on the chat, it was like, oh, what do we do for this woman? This baby's posterior and we're not getting anywhere. So one of the suggested ideas was turn the epidural off. And then we can, yeah. And then we can change her. But she has to, the mom has to want that, right? If she prepared for birth for the ability to give birth without an epidural, it's going to be something different than somebody who planned on an epidural. And for them, the idea of turning off the epidural is practically impossible. So it's always helpful to, even if you plan on an epidural, to also plan for tools of how to cope through the contractions without it.
But isn't it dangerous when we bring it in the back?
So they're trained to place epidurals, properly.
If the woman's moving.
So she has to sit still. Obviously there is a risk of making a mistake during an epidural. For somebody to actually become paralyzed as a result of epidural is extremely rare. Like I've never heard of it. Can it happen?
I've heard of spinal.
So one of the more common impacts of epidural is spinal headaches. It's a very severe headache, and women that go through that sometimes for weeks and months have very severe headaches that only resolve with her lowering her head. So functioning and nursing a baby and taking care of yourself is very difficult. Sometimes they can help that with the blood patch, but not guaranteed. So they go in, they do another epidural, and basically what happens is if they went too far, then that can result in puncturing something that shouldn't have been, and that's what's bringing on the headaches. So they can go back in there and take some blood and kind of like cover up that hole, so to speak, and that very often results in it. Sometimes people get an epidural and the epidural only works on one side, or it doesn't work, or it stops working. And that is kind of like the worst of both worlds kind of thing, because they're bound to bed, but now they can't move. So that is, another possible reason, why to consider giving birth without an epidural. I mean, the reason to give birth without an epidural, I don't need to elaborate on. I assume it's, well known. It's pain-free birth. And for the people that it works for, it's great. For the people that it works for, where baby, still comes down easily, and there are no hiccups, so to speak, it's really nice to give birth without pain.
Unless they want to keep the sensations.
Right. Right. Yeah.
They say like if you wait too late, then like some people regret it, but like what is someone supposed to do?
So I know that in certain countries, maybe there's such a thing as like too late. Here they'll give you an epidural. If somebody wants an epidural and they're already fully dilated, they're ready to start pushing, but they want an epidural, she can get an epidural. Whether she physically can sit still for an epidural, that's a different topic. But sometimes it's possible. No, it's you might have an occasional provider who is like, no, we're not giving an epidural, or who will discourage it. But there are definitely, I've had people who are like, I don't mind labor, I want to feel anything when I'm pushing.
How long does it take?
epidural placement.
For it to kick in.
So typically about half an hour. They say the procedure like all together takes about 15 minutes, but the actual like work is about 5 minutes, let's say. 15 minutes is prep and post and whatever, all that. And usually there's some relief that happens pretty quickly. What usually people experience is that the contractions are felt as shorter and lighter initially. They just get shorter and shorter, and they're felt less and less intense incrementally. And about half an hour post placement, they should be getting full relief.
Are there any side effects to the baby?
That's a very interesting question. I'm always told no. I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't tell you. But I hear a lot of people say that it can impact breastfeeding.
Also, is it the baby being yellow listed on the insert of it?
I haven't heard of
Early
that.
being used.
Epidural related? Doesn't mean.
Yeah.
One thing, sometimes epidural causes blood pressure drops, but it's not very common. They monitor for that. And then if somebody has lower, then they would need medication to deal with that.
Wait, what happens?
Sometimes people have a drop in blood pressure as a result of the epidural.
So what happens? Like it doesn't go back.
So if it comes back up right away by itself, great. If not, then they give medication for it.
What about the roller coaster concept?
The cascade of interventions.
Yes. We're already on this topic.
So the cascade of intervention is the idea that birth untouched will do its own thing as it's designed to, just like our digestion is, just as breathing is. Birth is designed to work, and then unless it's showing us that it needs help, we don't need to touch it. But as soon as we do start touching it, we might be dealing with something that we call the cascade of intervention. What that basically means is that, for example, somebody might be they reached 42 weeks and their doctor decided that now they have to be induced. Their labor has to be started using medication. And, we're going to start the process because the body hasn't started on its own. And because they're being induced, they're getting medicine that's making the contractions. The contractions are very strong. They have to stay in bed on a monitor the whole time because they can't walk around freely. Right. It's one of the ways that we can help feeling.
Sorry.
Sure.
What's the rush? Is it like an emergency? Like that baby has to come out after a certain
No, it's
time?
not an emergency.
Why?
Why is that? Because statistically, I guess they calculate how long average healthy pregnancy is, which they give you your estimated due date, which is 40 weeks from the beginning of the last period. We don't actually know when the right time is for a baby to be born. Some babies need to be born at 38 weeks, and some babies want to be born at 43 weeks. But statistically, there has shown that once a baby is past a certain due date or past a certain time in the pregnancy, there can be impacts to the placenta or to the baby or to the amount of fluids. And so if you ask me, the ideal way to go about that is to check with an individual person, like, oh, they're already 41, 42 weeks. Let's do an ultrasound. Let's check what's going on with this baby. Is there a sign that the baby, needs to come out, or maybe not? In that kind of situation, birth can happen in a window of time. Whereas if we're just taking the statistics of what overall is healthiest for most people, so then we end up dealing with absolute data. So at that point, it becomes like, oh, you're past certain points. So for most people at this point, it's no longer advisable to continue the pregnancy. So we're going to be inducing you. Most hospital-based practices will want to induce at 42 weeks latest.
Because of danger, because they find it dangerous.
Yeah.
Can I also just
It's not
put on,
legally mandated.
can I just put a Kala teacher hat for a second and say that as from women, calculating your pregnancy date according to Tarsa Mishpacha doesn't always add up to the medical world's calculation of pregnancy date. So if you're setting up a date, make sure to look at your mikvah night and what makes actual sense, because it may give you an extra week, or depending for different people is different. But something to keep in mind that sometimes their calculation is not so accurate according to what we keep in Tarsa Mishpacha.
So yeah.
Talking about
Did I-
vascular interventions, what happens when you
Yes.
start inducing.
So when, someone starts and they're being induced and now they are, they don't have the option anymore. Like, for example, if somebody wants to give birth without an epidural, they might stay home as long as possible. They might, even if they plan the hospital birth, they're going to stay home longer so that they can be in their own environment, so they can get all their hormones going and be in a place where they can, just be more comfortable. They're in the birth with an induction, so they're there from the get-go. The contractions might be more intense because it's, induced with medication, and so they're gonna, likely need an epidural to deal with the, pain relief and to deal with the pain. And as a result of that, they're going to be laying in bed. Now, progress of their birth might be impacted, meaning as a result of that, they might not, they're not using gravity, they're not moving around, they're not giving the baby that opportunity to rotate and come down as it needs to. And so she might end up with a C-section as a result of that lack of movement. There's other, variations of the cascade of intervention, but yeah, when we touch things, it doesn't always only do what we want it to do, so to speak. Position that feels right in that moment. That's the best moment. Yeah, birth, somebody mentioned before the vulnerability of birth, but something that comes to mind also when we talk about birth is how primal it is. It's something that our body is going through in a very intense way. And although there are certain things that might not matter in that moment, what we're actually experiencing and feeling matters very, very much. And if we are in a space where we can tune into where we're at and we don't feel like we need to behave in any way because of anybody outside of us, we don't feel watched, we feel like we could just do whatever, our body will tell us what to do. When you're standing in a crowded subway like this, nobody's telling you move your elbow this way because you'll have a little bit more space there. It happens automatically. Your body is the same way. But for the most part, the positions that are helpful are, walking upright is great. You're talking about birth, like delivery itself or labor? Delivery itself.
Because I'm a little confused because in the hospital, lying down, like here, it's easier than having. Well, that's what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But not personally. And like women giving birth is what, well, I can only talk from what my friends have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
They like squat or something. It's just like in the hospital, you might not have that possibility to do that.
Right. So first of all, there are even hospital where you can give birth in whichever position you choose. In New York, I don't think there are hospitals that will allow birth out of the bed. They always want you in the bed. Why? Because we live in the United States of America and everything is based on liability. That's the short answer. I can't say anything else. After you have your baby, mind you, you're also not allowed, they won't allow mom or dad to walk around holding their own baby. Is that because it's dangerous? You're going to be doing that at home, right? But if the baby, God forbid, falls while you're in the hospital, they can get sued. So the birth has to be in the bed. But on the bed, you can get very creative. You can
All
squat.
over or in certain hospitals, in certain providers.
So it depends which, yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. It depends who your doctor or midwife is going to be. Unfortunately, my doctor lets, my doctor doesn't let is something I hear very often. It makes me very, very sad. And sometimes it's good when we're with on this like chat with other doulas from all over the country, and particularly the British doulas. They're like, what does that even mean? Doctor lets, midwife doesn't let. Like, I decide, we as doulas, as midwives, as doctors, we have to tell the mom, these are the options, these are the pros and cons, but we don't get to decide. Unfortunately, in this, environment that we're in, very often it seems like, oh, my doctor says I have to. You never ever have to. You always have a choice. It's your body, it's your baby. But yeah, that
again. yeah, one more.
Can you like
one more time, ladies, it is your body. You decide, you choose, and nobody gets to tell you who, what, where, and how. Now, having said that, there's a real thing called white coat syndrome. So that is like that when somebody with a white coat walks in, some people, their blood pressure rises, they see the doctor, it actually physically impacts their blood pressure. But to make it, a lot more simple, when you're in a hospital and you're in a vulnerable state and you're giving birth and your doctor says, we have to do this, this, and that because it's, that's the safest right now. And sometimes they even go, more than that and, explain to you the dangers of the worst case scenario without giving you the best case scenario, which isn't fair. But obviously we want to be safe. So we're going to end up doing what we're told to do. Right. But we do always have a choice.
An incredible doula can be a great advocate.
100%. And also learning how to ask questions. Do we have to? What happens if we do? What happens if we don't?
But you're not giving
That's where
That's
where the homework starts.
Yeah.
That's where you start with choosing. Ideally, you're going to give birth with someone who you trust with your eyes closed. And if for whatever reason that's not an option for you, or you chose something else and you have a valid reason to, because you have a medical condition and you need to give birth in a hospital, or you need a high risk doctor, right? Somebody who's low risk, who's healthy, they're having a regular pregnancy, nothing exciting. They don't need a high risk doctor. They can give birth with a regular doctor or with a midwife.
high risk is pretty good with the 9
That's a very good question. That's another statistical risk. That doesn't mean that any individual mom. So find someone who's not going to put you in that category. My midwife that I use, not my youngest, but the one before that, stopped working, and I had to find a new midwife, and it was
They all know her.
considering everybody knows Christine.
Yeah.
So considering that I am 39 years old, it was one of the questions on my interview. I called midwives and I interviewed them, and I said, because I am, of, what they call officially advanced maternal age, is that going to change any way that you're going to want me to do things, or anything you're going to, do during my birth or during my pregnancy that's different? And if yes, then I'm going to look for a different midwife. Because statistically, there are certain ways that somebody's having their first baby might be at higher and young might be at higher risk in certain ways than somebody who's already had a bunch of kids and that's of advanced maternal age. Obviously, somebody that's older and is having their first does put them at higher risk, but I'm healthy and young. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I had healthy births, and I want to continue with that without anybody being alarmist about my age.
You're right. Your options. Like there's home births, but there's hospital births. Hospitals here are very a lot of policy. But in other places, there's like more. Like there's more.
There is one birth center active that I know of right now, And they've had a lot of like coming and going of staff, movement, suddenly closing when all their patients are in their 8th and 9th month and find out yesterday that they're closed tomorrow kind of thing. So it's, but you're right in a certain way. What do you do when you're in that situation? I know you scramble for somebody else, but you're right in what you know. I interestingly enough, I actually grew up in Holland, and there, first of all, home birth is very common and popular, but also it's very streamlined, meaning you can choose a group of midwives, and then you can give birth with those same midwives either at home or in the hospital or in the birth center. And if something comes up, it's just all like if here, for example, somebody chooses a home birth, but then they're dealing with some sort of complication or risk factor which no longer allows them to give birth, they kind of have to start from scratch. Whereas there, kind of like it flows, you know, there's a better communication system. And in a certain way, what you're saying is true. It doesn't make it impossible to have a positive birth experience in a hospital, and I know many people who do and who have. Will someone be more likely to be limited because of certain policies and things, depending if those policies bother you or not, right? So I don't know. Again, like some things are negotiable, you know, and depending on who your doctor or midwife is, you can, maybe their go-to is that while you're giving birth, you're going to have a belt around your belly the whole time, and they're going to monitor the baby's heart rate and your contractions the whole entire time. Whether that's necessary or not is, you know, a topic in and of itself, but that's their go-to way of doing it. And you're like, hey, I really want to give birth without that. I want to, you know, the baby's heart rate just to be checked periodically, not the whole time being attached to a, you know, a machine or a monitor. And they might be okay with that. Somebody else might give birth with those, you know, monitors on the whole time, and for them it's normal and it's not a problem. Doesn't mean it can't impact them, you know, but it depends what you want.
And also, home birth doesn't have to be cesarean. Meaning, you could still have a nice birth in the hospital, and you can also have a very nice birth at home without it being so. Like both sides of the coin.
Either one can be scary or safe, depending what you're coming from, what you want, what you need, and how you know, put your mind to it. That's, you know, my kind of spin on it.
Well, like sorry, but I heard that periods are more less painful or less painful.
For some people, that might be the case. It's normal for things around your period to change, whether it's the length of your period or the intensity or the pain. There can be hormonal changes when somebody goes through birth. And it can also vary from birth to birth. Like, you know, talking about, for example, how soon after birth does your period come back? You can, you know, some people, they don't get their period for 2 years straight after every single, you know, birth. Not very common, unfortunately, but there are definitely people for them that's their normal, and then there are people who always get their period right away.
Wait,
you know,
still have
and then there.
babies?
Say that again.
It doesn't affect them getting
Um,
pregnant. No, 2 years. Why?
If you're not getting your period,
then they won't get pregnant, but because ovulation happens before they get your period, right? Somebody ovulates, that's the window while they're ovulating, that's when they can get pregnant. And then 2 weeks later, if they didn't get pregnant, they get their period. So technically the first period comes after their ability to get pregnant. So we actually don't have a warning sign of when we can get pregnant again. And so many people will get pregnant without ever having a period. But some people, like I said, there's variety of change, hormonal change that is common after birth, and it could vary. Sometimes some people can get their period back very quickly after birth for some child, and then the next child they might have a longer gap till their period comes back. As in, when is it normal for someone to get their period again?
No,
Or how long space does there need to be?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, there's no medical need of space. unless somebody has, what did you want to share what you read?
No, I just wanted to hear.
Yeah, no, unless somebody has, the only situation where that really applies is when somebody gave birth via C-section. That there is time that the scar needs to heal. And ideally there should be 24 months from birth to birth for the scar to be fully healed. Now there will be, this is a very interesting topic, and there will be variety in what other, some doctors might say that you can wait less time. Particularly in a community where people want to have, many births, scars from C-section can be a risk factor for future pregnancies and births. So I think that for, the safety of that and the fact that we're not just having 2 kids, it is important to wait the longer stretch of time.
Kala teacher hat again.
Thank you. Most Rabbanim agree.
For most Rabbanim, a C-section is a 2-year head. Wow. With that, if you're, I will say that Be'ezus Hashem next Wednesday, we are having a talk with midwives, and they're gonna be able to also continue answering even more questions. They're going to also share their training and ask about. Basically, I submitted all the questions that I think most people have, and they're going to be doing that. So look out for the flyer for next Wednesday, Be'ezus Hashem. And in the meantime, we have 2 parts. One is we take a selfie that we take together. If you haven't yet signed the doch for the Rebbe of tonight, that's gonna go around. And we want to thank Chaya Musia. I don't know what your color choice is. You'll tell me when you get a moment. But I want to thank you so much for speaking for us. So this is on behalf of all of us. This is a tree that when you light your Shabbos candles and you have your match, you put it down and it doesn't make a mess all over your.
Much
So
appreciated.
that's that.
Because mess is our current
Exactly.
reality.
And this is your match box.
Very
I don't know what
pretty.
your set at home is. You can choose whatever color fits your home better. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time and the effort to prepare. On behalf of all of us, we say thank you. And take